welcome to the show. Hey, hi. Oh, we got some familiar faces in the audience today. You know, I get a lot of letters from people because, as you may know, I make these videos to help support people who've left the organization and people who are currently active members who are Jehovah's Witnesses. Because you see, some of these people who are actively in the organization would love to leave if they could, but they feel trapped. They've got family members who they would lose. Family members and all their friends if they actually made the move to get out of the organization. And then there's people who have left the organization and they're dealing with the aftermath of all the effects of this, losing their entire support system and feeling all alone in the world. And I know the organization loves to say that only people who commit gross sins are disfellowshipped, but that is simply not true. Because if somebody simply wants to leave because they've seen so many lies that the organization has told, how is that a gross sin? It's not. They're simply calling the organization for what they've seen, and they want to leave as a result. So I don't blame the members of the organization because I was one too, and I know that they are trying to do their best with what they believe is right. I do blame the organization though, because they know darn well what they are doing when they shun people. Shunning is a cruel tactic, and there's nothing scriptural that you can find to support shunning a family member. And the organization really couldn't care less what the aftermath is for anybody who wants to leave. They know how tough it is. They know that love is a strong bond between a parent and a child, and they're determined to break that bond. They want all the loyalty to go to them. So if they see that it's being threatened in any way, that you're giving loyalty to maybe a family member, they will find a way to break that. And this is a despicable policy. It's a despicable tactic that they use against anyone who wants to leave the organization. It really keeps the members hostage. And since I made my last video, I actually made a video last May talking about the shunning policy and why it's wrong. And since I did that, the organization has come out with not one, but 2 shunning videos. And it really shows that they are not wanting to become more like Jesus, who showed mercy and love, but rather they are much more like the Pharisees, quick to judge, quick to turn their backs on you, and quick to use old scriptures from the Old Testament to try to prove their point without realizing the love and the mercy that Jesus was there to show. And so what they did is during their regional conventions, they showed a video and then about shunning and how to do it. And then just recently in their November JW broadcasting episode, they also did another video. Let's see how they introduced it.
When a dear friend or perhaps even a family member leaves the truth, it can be a very challenging situation. It can truly be a test of our faith when we see something like that take place.
The organization always paints itself as the victim. They see no good reason why anyone would want to leave. Never mind if you were abused or depressed or suicidal or couldn't stomach the overlapping generations theory. Whatever happens, the heck with you. It's a test of their faith.
While watching this dramatization, pay attention to how the mother was able to champion the truth by remaining loyal to Jehovah.
So not picking up the phone when your kids call and completely cutting them off makes you a champion? It's funny because champions are usually very happy and proud of their accomplishments. JW.org repeatedly downplays and outright lies about their shunning process. Shunning is an embarrassment and a form of bullying, certainly not the actions of champions. So a video on their process of how to get JWs to shun a family member and bring them to the brink of suicide to get them to return to JW.org was shown at their regional conventions. This one that they showed was about a girl who had been out of the organization, disfellowshipped, and she was shunned by her parents for 15 years before eventually she broke down and returned to the organization. During those 15 years, she ended up giving her parents 2 grandchildren, but they were shunned too. 2 innocent children who had done nothing to deserve the cruel and inhumane treatment were shunned as well. The second video that they showed was the one I mentioned at the JW broadcasting episode that you just saw the introduction for. And this is about a son who had disassociated himself. And he was being shunned by his parents. In the video there, they say that he was being shunned for 5 years and without an end to that. So he's still being shunned. You know, the love between a parent and a child is a natural bond. And yet the Bible talks about ones that would have showing no natural affection, that this is how men would be in the time of the end, showing no natural affection towards one another. It is unnatural to shun your own child. And yet that is what the organization will have you do. When you watch these videos on how to shun your child, you're going to see that they want you to cut off all feelings. You know, the kid's going to be calling you. Don't pick up the phone. Don't have any feelings. Remember, it's for their good that you're doing this cruel treatment. Unnatural, disgusting. So we're going to see that there is an actual process because both the videos that they showed are actually quite similar. One thing that they do is they play sad music that's meant to tug at your heartstrings. In the first part of the videos, they show the mother walking into the room of the child who's now estranged and looking all weepy and sad. The husband follows closely. Let's have a look.
I didn't think about the devastation and disappointment that I had caused them.
Step 2 is to get the kids out of the house. Portray the kids as immoral, rebellious, and ungrateful jerks. Don't show them as being human, or maybe show how heartbroken they might feel, how they just lost everything. They got kicked out of the house, they've lost their parents, they've lost their friends, how they might feel. No, only show it from the parents' perspective. The parents got to choose their religion, but the kids have no choice. And when they do make a decision, they're punished for it.
Later, my father explained to me that I couldn't remain in the home because I refused to change my lifestyle.
I couldn't believe this was happening to us.
Then I'm out of this house. I was determined to do what I wanted. When I left home that day, all I could think about was Eric.
Step 3 is to show the parents crying. Portray them as being completely innocent and totally devastated. Show it from only their perspective and make it all about them. Step 4 is to show it being announced from the platform that they are either disfellowshipped or disassociated. Both, of course, evoke the same punishment, cold-hearted shunning.
Our son Levi was no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Sonia Erickson has been disfellowshipped.
It crushed my whole family.
Okay, to continue the meeting, we may remember last month's service.
Step 5 is to have the child reach out to the parents, but then have the parents refuse to even answer the telephone, claiming loyalty to Jehovah.
Then, as hard as the past few weeks had been, it just got harder. I knew what the Bible said about quit mixing in company with anyone who is not living according to Christian standards, but I never thought that scripture would one day apply to me.
I tried to contact them. I just wanted to talk and to hear their voice. I missed being with my family. And they thought about reaching out to me. But they knew that if they had associated with me, even a little, just to check on me, that small dose of association might have satisfied me.
Step 6 is to forget about all the teachings of Jesus, all the times he spoke about love and mercy and not judging others and forgiving them. Stories like the parable of the prodigal son, for example, where the father immediately extended mercy to his son. Instead, let's go back to the Old Testament, which the organization says was abolished with Jesus' ransom sacrifice. Yet let's find a story from there instead, because we can't find anything in the New Testament to support shunning a family member.
Later that evening, a brother was talking about the example of Korah's sons. Jehovah confirmed that he was using Moses to lead his people, not Korah. When the people were told to move away from the rebels' tents, what would Korah's sons do? Would they put loyalty to family ahead of loyalty to Jehovah? The Bible tells us that his sons remained loyal to Jehovah and were blessed for it.
Jehovah directly judged 2 of Aaron's sons and put them to death. In this case, Jehovah asked Aaron and his family not to mourn, in order to show the entire nation that they supported Jehovah's judgment. Mom and Dad saw that they needed to be loyal, just like Aaron.
Step 7 is to have the parents convince themselves that their unrelenting and cruel shunning is the right thing to do, not supported by anything that they can find in the Bible, but supported by Watchtower publications.
But then, he said something that I hadn't thought of. If we were to stand between Levi and the discipline he needs, we would in effect be blocking an expression of Jehovah's love from reaching him. In fact, it's our very loyalty to Jehovah that could save his life. We agreed to continue to put our trust in Jehovah and stay loyal to him.
Step 8 is to do absolutely nothing to help your own child, your own flesh and blood, but instead keep busy proselytizing to complete strangers.
It's been 5 years now, and while Levi still hasn't returned to Jehovah, I haven't given up hope on him. Until that day, I'm staying busy as a regular pioneer and focusing my energies on helping others learn about Jehovah.
What helped Gabriella overcome this difficult challenge? For example, when she received a text message from her son, she applied scriptural counsel to her personal circumstances. The good example of Korah's sons gave her added motivation so as not to allow her feelings for her son to dictate her actions. Instead, she was firm in her loyalty to Jehovah. Also, her husband Ben had found an article that helped the two of them appreciate that they should make sure not to stand between Jehovah and their son Levi. Instead, they wanted Jehovah's expression of love to reach Levi.
So this is their process on how to get a family member to remain loyal to them and to completely turn their back on their own flesh and blood. This is the utmost control that an organization can have, that you would actually cut off a family member in favor of a religion. You know, it's so sick and perverse. I don't know what else to say, but it really demonstrates why so many Jehovah's Witnesses are on antidepressants and so many commit suicide. Because it's not natural to do such a thing. They say, well, we don't cut off family members. We're not the ones breaking up families. Well, if that's the case, you saw those videos. Who was the one reaching out? And who was the one refusing to answer the phone? They have the choice of the religion that they want, but they take that choice away from the child. The breakup of thousands of witness families could all be avoided if the organization followed the example of Jesus and stopped baptizing children. JW.org proudly asserts that they don't baptize infants, but they do baptize children as young as 7 or 8. And really, what's the difference? Children believe what they are told. If you tell them there's a tooth fairy, they believe it. If you insist that the overlapping generation of 1914 is now the truth, they will believe that too. Jesus didn't get baptized as a child, but waited until he was around 30. At the age of 12, he certainly had the knowledge, because the Gospels show that he could hold his own in the temple. So if Jesus, in all his perfection and with all his knowledge, decided to wait until he was 30 before he dedicated his life to God, why would JW Org feel that they know better and allow mere children with no life experience to get baptized? No, instead the governing body encourages parents to threaten their children who aren't baptized by the age of 16.
Well, I'm not ready to get baptized. Okay, let's hold off on your driver's license. What? I'm 16. What are you talking about? I'm ready. I know I'm ready. Yeah, you're ready for a driver's license, but you're not ready to dedicate your life. Explain that one to heaven.
Explain that one to heaven? Good grief. How about he explains to heaven why he's trying to force a child to get baptized by threatening him to withhold his driver's license? The driver's license should not be the motivating factor why someone should be getting baptized. It's a personal decision between you and God, and they have absolutely no right to interfere with this. You know, pushing a child to get baptized by threatening him is the reason why a lot of children end up being disfellowshipped later on. They were pushed into doing something that they weren't ready to do, made to feel guilty, made to feel that they should be doing this. I know, because it's exactly what I lived through, and I know it's still going on today, except I was 14 when I was pushed into getting baptized. Today, kids 7 or 8 are being pushed into it. The problem is that teenagers may rebel. As you get older, you learn things in life. Now you've got some life experience. When a child of 7 or 8 or even 14 is baptized, they don't know the true history of the organization. They weren't told about the UN scandal. They didn't know about all the times the organization has lied or made people feel that the end was right around the corner with 1914 and 1925 and 1975. They don't know about all these things. All these books they're not being published anymore by the organization. So they have no idea the true nature of this organization. So they get baptized under false pretenses. And then when they are teenagers and they begin to figure a few things out in life and they begin to rebel and exert themselves because they don't know how to handle, discipline, and they don't know how to handle things in life, so they may lash out, and start thinking for themselves and start doing things that are wrong. And their hormones are raging, It's a difficult thing to be a teenager. I know I was there. I didn't actually rebel until I was about 30. I was a really good kid. It's when I was about 30 I started thinking, this sucks. This isn't right, But when a child, a teenager rebels, the last thing they need in the world is to be cut off from their whole support system and just, hey, okay, you're bad, get out. You were baptized, you knew what you were doing. Really? No, they didn't know what they were doing. And that's the problem. The organization is just completely screwy when it comes to this. And the other thing that makes them completely bizarre is their ideas of why a person should come back. It is so messed up. They threaten people to get baptized, and they're equally messed up when they want people to return. Listen to an actual JW couple explain this at a convention.
What was it that moved your child to return to Jehovah?
Well, it was the missed association with the family, and here's why. I had always told our kids, I told our kids that I would die for you, I love you, would die for you, but if you ever leave Jehovah, I wouldn't be there. And they knew that we wouldn't waver on this. But sad to say, and as hard as it was, we had to cut off all association.
That is so sick and messed up. So they use shunning as a manipulative tool to try to bring people back to the organization, family members who have left. The parents may have chosen the religion, but the kids have no choice. And the parents will only acknowledge them if they come back to the religion. What kind of a choice is that? Your religion or your family? Yet, hypocritically, the organization says that no one should have to do this. Check out this Watchtower article here from 2009. It says no one should be forced to worship in a way that he finds unacceptable or be made to choose between his beliefs and his family. Yet this is exactly what JW.org does. If a teenager decides that he doesn't want to be part of the religion anymore, yet he'd been baptized at the age of 7 or 8 before he knew any better, he's going to have to choose between being cut off from his family or going back to a religion that he doesn't believe in. The organization wants their rights to be respected, yet they're the first to take away the rights of everybody else. I guess this watchtower doesn't apply to them. It applies to everybody but them. And notice too that they couldn't find even one example of shunning a family member in the New Testament. No, they had to go back to the Old Law Covenant. They'll admit that this was abolished by the ransom sacrifice of Jesus, yet they'll conveniently drag it up whenever it suits them. We know Jesus' teachings were a complete 180 of what was taught in the Old Law Covenant. He taught love and mercy and not to judge others. And in fact, when you look into the gospel accounts, we'll find pages and pages of verses that highlight this and Jesus' teachings. Yet they prefer to be like their former counterparts, the Pharisees, who would prefer to judge one another and insist on punishing people using old laws that God abolished. Let's take a look at some of the verses showing mercy that Jesus highlighted. And I've set it to the tune of Kingdom Melodies number 130 called Be Forgiving. Jesus did not teach his followers to shun. Rather, we know he gave the parable of the prodigal son. I'm sure you're familiar with the story, but just to recap. The son had demanded his inheritance from the father, left his home, and journeyed off. He ended up spending it all, and began to envy the slaves and the food belonging to the pigs. He decided to return home, but before his father even knew his son's true intentions, he ran off and hugged him, immediately accepting him back into the house. This parable shows the deep love of a father for his lost son, which no organization should ever try to come between. The other thing to remember is that the organization does make mistakes, and they do change their doctrines quite frequently. For example, there was a time when they used to forbid organ transplants. But now they've since changed that. There was a time when they said that if you had an organ transplant, it would be the same as cannibalism. Well, now they don't feel that way. They've had a change of heart. But think of all the, no pun intended, but think of all the people who may have died because they needed an organ transplant, but the society said, no, it's cannibalism. You cannot do such a thing. Same thing goes for blood fractions. Think of all the people that may have died because they refused any form of blood, but now it's okay to have blood fractions. And then there's people who spend sometimes a decade or more in prison in countries where they would have people who were citizens of that country do a form of military service. They respected people who were conscientious objectors and actually said, you know what, I don't believe in guns, I don't believe in wars. So these countries would say, okay, you could do a comparable service, like maybe you could clean the garbage, take the garbage out, or look after the gardening that needs to be done at the military base, or some type of other form of service. But even that wasn't good enough for the Jehovah's Witness organization. And many of our brothers spent 10 or more years in prison. And you know what the weird thing is? They never apologized. Can you imagine if you ended up spending 10 years in prison because of some idiot who made a mistake? And at the end of the 10 years, when you got out, the person didn't even apologize to you. They didn't make any amends to you. They didn't compensate you in any way. They just said, oh, well, I'm not perfect. That doesn't fly, does it? That wouldn't fly with anybody. Yet somehow it's okay with JW.org. They're just imperfect men. Check out the February 2017 Watchtower and see what they have to say there. Notice the parts there that I've highlighted. It says the governing body is neither inspired nor infallible. Therefore, it can err in doctrinal matters or in organizational direction. Jesus did not tell us that his faithful slave would produce perfect spiritual food. Can you imagine Moses saying, "Come everyone, follow me into the wilderness. I've got lots of things I want to command you to do, but I'm not inspired of God. I'm just an imperfect man." I mean, are you going to follow this man? Are you going to listen to this man? Doesn't make any sense. So why should we listen to these uninspired, fallible men? So when mistakes are made, and there have been many mistakes made by this organization, is this because they weren't listening to God? Because they were refusing to heed his commandments and his directions? Or is it because God was never behind this organization to begin with? Ding, ding, ding. I think it's because God's never been behind this organization. Just take a look at the history of it. Does this look like an organization that God has been behind? Do your research, and I think it's quite obvious that he's never been behind JW.org. So are you going to risk your life because you've trusted in an organization of erroneous men that keep flip-flopping? Are you willing to sacrifice a relationship with one of your family members only to have years later, when it's too late, the organization say, "Oh yeah, we don't follow that type of shunning anymore"? That would really be something. But that's exactly what continues to happen in this organization. They just walk away and say, what are you going to do? Garrett Loesch, who is a governing body member, further had things to say about this in the November JW broadcasting episode. Let's have a look.
The faithful and discreet slave is not inspired, although it champions the truth. Nevertheless, the faithful slave provides spiritual food, whereas in the first century there was supernatural knowledge available for apostles and Bible writers. In the time of the end, Jehovah does not bestow this miraculous gift anymore, as explained at 1 Corinthians 13:8. Although there is no divine inspiration today, still Jesus leads his people progressively through the services of the faithful slave. Jesus trusts that the imperfect faithful slave will do its best to convey spiritual food. Do you also trust the slave?
No, I don't trust them. I did for 30 years, but I just kept getting disappointed time and time again. Is there an expression that goes something like, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me"? I mean, this is what life is all about. You learn your lessons. I've done research, and I see absolutely no shred of evidence that Jesus ever selected them in 1919, not with all the pagan teachings that they were doing back then. They don't even believe what they believed in 1919 now. All those books are out of print, and they're out of print for a reason, because they're full of weird stuff. That doesn't make any sense. It may have made sense at that time, but it sure doesn't make sense now. And why would Jesus select an organization teaching falsehoods? And the other point is, I don't like to follow men. In fact, the Bible says not to. Let's look at what it says in Psalm 146, verse 3. It says, "Do not put your trust in princes, nor in a son of man, who cannot bring salvation." So as we can see, the shunning policy employed by the Jehovah's Witnesses organization is a cruel embarrassment. And shunning a family member is simply not scriptural. Jesus showed a new way, and that was to be loving and merciful and kind and showing forgiveness and not judging other people. He says that he will be the judge, so leave it up to him to judge. It is not up to us or the governing body to do this. If you choose to remain as a Jehovah's Witness, that's certainly your choice, but you don't need to shun. I know many active Jehovah's Witnesses who take the time to see their family. Okay, they don't, make a big deal out of it to their fellow members. They're not going to, go on the rooftop and shout out that they're going to go see their daughter. But quietly they see their daughter or sons on a regular basis. And this is what normal parents do. It's wrong they should have to sneak about. That is not right. But at least they're taking the time and showing that they are human beings. Don't be like the Pharisees. You should be loving people and loving Christians the way you claim to be. So on a different topic, I just want to announce something that has come to my attention, and that is that the Royal Australian Commission is going to reinvestigate the Jehovah's Witnesses organization and what their policies are regarding the handling of children who have been abused. And I'm very happy about this because the organization has simply not handled these different abuses in a right way. They have created what many people call a pedophile's paradise, and it needs to be dealt with. And it's really too bad that it has to come to Satan's world to straighten them out and to show them that this is cruel and not loving and not kind at all to do this kind of thing and to not look after children properly. But it is going to be done. And the date will be March 20th of 2017. And I will put a link in the description of this video. So everybody, thank you for coming to watch. And that's our show for today. And I hope you enjoyed it. And if you like it, then like it. And I'll see you another time. Thank you. Bye.